Hello everyone, welcome to the True Paranormal. Today I'll be discussing my Beardo Live Fake vs Real Part 4 article that I released last Friday. Just so you all know, I am still ill. This is like the longest period of time that I have been ill for, I'm pretty sure, because I've been ill for over a month now. So if I need to cough or if I'm sounding snotty or whatever, that is why. But in today's stream, I'll be reading through my notes, which I wrote before doing the article last week. It's a few pages, is it 5 or is it 4? 4 pages for this one. So 4 pages worth of notes that I'm going to read through. There are a couple of discussion points. So if you've read the article, you'll know exactly how this live stream will go regarding layout. So I'll read out a comment that someone may have sent during Beardo's live stream, and then I'll read out everyone's responses, and I'll give my own thoughts as well when a chance arises to. As I've said, like through Beardo's live stream, it was conducted in August. There were many brilliant discussion points raised, which is why I've documented it in what will be 5 articles plus an extra one for discussing the reaction, because I noticed after Beardo's live stream that 3 particular paranormal investigation teams, channels, groups, whatever you want to refer to them as, that they commented in some way, or at least I believe they were all commented, like prompted from that. 2 of them definitely were, because they mentioned Beardo's live. One of them, I'm not sure, but they put out their statement a few days after Beardo did his live, and yeah, even though they don't mention Beardo's live, they hit a number of points which were echoed throughout Beardo's live, which is why I'm going to discuss that as well. But that will be not yet, basically. In a few days, it'll be part 5, which is the final one documenting the entire stream, and then hopefully maybe next week it'll be that. But anyway, yeah, so I'll try and keep this as brief as I can. I am in work tomorrow on stocktake, which means I'm in at 6 in the morning, which I've not been told when my taxi is yet, which isn't great, but yeah, it might be about 5 or 4 in the morning, so 4 or 5 in the morning I'll have to wake up, so I'll try and be as brief as I can, because I will be going live on TikTok after this, for anyone who is interested. Anyway, so this segment of Beardo's live stream started with a comment from MAD Paranormal Investigations. They are a viewer of Beardo's stream, and they sent in a comment which said, "You must be open to it or you'll never catch anything." So that's in regards to, it's quite often discussed that if you don't experience any activity within a haunted location, that this is because you are not open to it. You're skeptical. You're kind of quite closed off. And just got distracted then because the notification came up on my tablet. But yeah, so that's in relation to that argument that if you go somewhere and you don't experience something, it's not because the place isn't haunted, it's because you are not open to experiencing things. I also apologise if I sneeze. I've just felt it then that I may need to, but yeah. So Beardo responds by saying that it's not a true statement. Statement, I'll repeat, being you must be open to it or you'll never catch anything. Beardo says it's not a true statement, and he knows people who are very sceptical and they see something and then their mind is blown. Kev says that he's been a skeptic for 15 years and he's still had multiple experiences, and Beardo gives an example as well at this point, saying that his mum doesn't believe any of it, but she rung a couple of weeks ago, visited the house, and then Beardo's mum saw her mum walk into the room, say I'm sorry, and then walk out again. And Beardo's mum said that, you know, she was confused because she was like, oh, ghosts aren't real, but then she saw her mum, so she was left in that kind of, but they're not real, but I saw my mum, but they're not real, but I saw my mum, that kind of thing. And Beardo said that she potentially, that her mum potentially came in and said that, or his mum dreamt it. They're like the 2 options. And then his mum was convinced that she was awake because she knew what she was doing at the time. and everything Beardo does is nonsense to her, but now she watches other channels. So these kinds of things happen. And this, to be fair, it's one reason, because I've recently, and I'm umming and ahhing over whether or not to cover this, because I know Jason Hawes, who's quite a well-known investigator. He's someone I need to research more into, do an article about, because I didn't know about him until Beardo discussed him. Because he's, I believe, an American investigator, and I kind of, I don't really know anything regarding the American side of things. But yeah, with Jason Hawes, he's recently done a video saying that the paranormal is easier to prove than it is to disprove. And I know Mr. Grey, from World of Mr. Grey, I believe his channel's called, he has come out doing a kind of in a way a response, to other side of the argument type thing, where he's reacted to Jason Hawes' video saying, no, it's actually easier to disprove because he's more skeptically minded. So he's put a counter argument out there, and I've been debating whether or not to cover that. But in terms of this, this is one of the reasons why I think the paranormal exists, because you have all sorts of people, skeptical, not skeptical, having these experiences. And I feel if you were skeptical and you have this experience, you'd be more likely to explain it. Whereas otherwise, you may not be able to explain it, kind of thing. So that's one of the reasons why I think the paranormal, because you have skeptics experiencing things and then they can't believe it, but they're like, well, but it must be a ghost. That's one of the things as to why I think that the paranormal exists. And so I may very well cover the Jason Hawes video and the Mr. Grey video that has happened. But yeah, so Justin from the Paranormal Monkey podcast then says that he gets it again and again. People say they don't get anything as he isn't open-minded and he needs to open himself up to it happening. But he's skeptical and yet still experienced what he believes is a genuine paranormal experience. And it's not because of him or his belief system. It's nothing to do with being closed off. It just happened around him, and it's purely something that'll happen no matter what. And Joe says paranormal activity is very rare. And I agree. I do think that it'll happen no matter what. And I do think that anyone, no matter who you are, can experience these things. And like I say, I think that this is a big reason as to why the paranormal exists. I think that the fact that anyone, regardless of belief, can experience it, and you've got so many different sightings and reports and unexplained things. You can be as skeptical as you like, you can know as much as you like, but chances are you'll encounter something that you then can't explain, and even if you share it with other people, they might be like, oh, that's really interesting. And there's a lot of that, which is why I think the paranormal exists. But yeah, so my own take on the you must be open to it or you'll never catch anything, I think you don't need to be open. It depends on what they mean by open. I've used this comparison, I believe, in the article, where there are different ways of thinking about open, right? There's kind of psychically open, as in, are you going into a place and actively kind of being quiet and trying to sense your surroundings type of open? Or is it open as in you're skeptical, but you go into a place and you say, if there are any spirits here, please make a noise? There are those two different levels of open, and it depends on what this person's asking regarding that. But I think that I think all you need to do to be able to get activity, if a place is haunted, is you need to go in and you need to just try and talk to the spirits. And like I say, I use this comparison of just, if I was sat here, and I was just sat here doing nothing, and people were in the room, if those people couldn't see me, let's hypothetically pretend that I was a ghost for this situation, right? From the ghost perspective, because this is something I like to try and think of, like, what is the paranormal like from the ghost's perspective, as opposed to the investigator's perspective. So I think if you were a ghost, and you're in this house, no one can see you, you've spent however many years, no one talking to you, you're probably not going to interact, right? If you do try and interact, it's either going to be because you're new to the ghostly world, as it were, and you don't understand what's happening. or it's going to be a case of you're getting quite annoyed or bored at the fact that no one's talking to you, and you're like, oh, well, this is a bit boring, there's nothing to do, or you just getting annoyed because no one's hearing you. So it's like, if I didn't know I was a ghost, for instance, and then there were people all around me and I was trying to talk to them, they didn't respond, I would then probably try and move things, try and interact with the environment to get their attention, and that is probably where you get poltergeist activity from. That's what I suspect anyway. So if suddenly, like, you could do all of that, kick up a force, no one responds, and you kind of feel defeated, give up, probably. And then you'll have an investigation team come in. And in regards to them being open, if they came in, just set up equipment, didn't really do anything, the spirit's not probably going to do anything, especially if the spirit doesn't know about investigators and whatnot. So if that was the case, the spirit's not going to do anything, the equipment might not go off, the investigators will leave going, oh, it's not haunted. But if the investigators go in, it doesn't matter about their mindset. At least I don't believe it matters about their mindset. The investigators could go in and they could walk around, and if they say, is there anyone here? Straight away they think the spirit's attention is going to pick up and go, hang on a minute, what? Are they talking to each other? And then the investigators then will continue being like, if there's someone here, if there's a spirit here, if there's someone here we cannot see, please make a noise, let us know you're here. And the spirit's going to be like, hang on a minute, what? It's kind of like, if you think animals, like pets, dogs, that kind of thing, I'm sure if you have had a pet dog or an animal like that, I don't know if cats do the same thing, but dogs definitely do. Dogs have this thing where either they've got a really good sense of smell or they suspect the time of day in terms of pattern. And if you've gone to work, the dog will know when you're pulling into the drive or whatever, like outside the house, and then the dog will run up to the window and go mental because it suspects you back. Even if you're not back yet, they'll know it's the time of day and they'll kind of be like, ooh. I think ghosts could be similar in that kind of behaviour of if they suspect that someone is trying to talk to them, suddenly the ghost's like, ooh, wait, they might actually, I mean, they might be able to see them, but they can interact with me, what? And I think that's then where you get more activity from. It's that not necessarily I think the activity doesn't necessarily come from an openness to believe it exists, but it rather comes from the openness to communicate if it does. I think that's what it is. And I think that's my stance on it. I don't think you need to absolutely believe or disbelieve or any of that. I think you just need to, in order to experience something, I don't even think you need to do that to experience something, by the way. I think that all you need to do to experience something is be in a location with a ghost in it. That's all. That's all it is. Because it depends on what stage that ghost is at, in theory. With, like I say, like, if they're relatively new for haunting that location, they may be more inclined to kick up activity even if you don't do anything. I feel like the activity only dwindles once the spirit realizes, hang on a minute, I don't think we're actually going to be able to do, like, I don't think I can communicate with them. If they kind of lose hope, that's when it dwindles. That's my suspicion. I could be completely wrong with that. Yeah, so I think anyone can experience activity anywhere that has had human history. And I think that, yeah, it doesn't matter if you're skeptical or if you're a believer. I think if you want to try and increase levels of activity, all you have to do is try your best to communicate with any spirits that may be there. And this is probably why psychics, I do believe psychics exist. I don't think real psychics charge fees, etc. for their services. But I think this is why real psychics may get more activity and why there might be a belief around that. Well, why there is a belief, because there is a belief, people do believe this, that if you're more open psychically, that you're going to get more activity. Because if you're open psychically, you might be more inclined to hit the nail on the head regarding details of the spirit. So if someone walked into the room, like say, back to hypothetical of me being a ghost, and they were walking around just saying random nonsense that doesn't relate to me, then I'll be like, oh, then they don't know me, then, you know, I'd be put off communicating with them. But if suddenly they called out a name and that was my name, so they're like, oh, they know me, you know, that kind of, and I'd be more inclined to interact. That's my own thoughts on it anyway. I think that's what it is. I think that's worth looking into, I think, in terms of investigation. But again, there's lots of levels of analysis that you'd need to do to actually see if that's a trend. And it would vary location to location depending on various factors, probably to do with energy. So you might get a trend, but it might be an inconsistent trend, which how much of a trend is an inconsistent trend, you know? And yeah, so Kev then says, it's part of the human experience. It's not down to belief, but belief amplifies it. So kind of just what I was saying there. Oh. Again, sorry for the coughs, I am still ill. It's kind of like a tickly, phlegmy cough at the moment. It's disgusting. And he says there's a psychological aspect, and that someone not thinking about ghosts can still have a paranormal experience. And if the answer to what that is, if answer to what that is, see, this is again, some of my notes are quite shorthand, and my handwriting's awful, so I'm just like, what is this that I've written? So the answer to what that is then could, oh yeah. So it's saying about recreating it. So if you knew what it was that caused the paranormal experience, then you can recreate it, make it happen again and again. Which is good, because that's what science is. You try and discover something, you try and recreate it. Anyone, regardless of belief system, proven through history with multiple ghost stories, majority of people will have paranormal experience not based on belief. So yeah, so it's not based on belief. It is just, it'll happen when it'll happen kind of thing. And I do agree with that. It's basically just the points I've just gone over. But I do think it's important to look at things from the perspective of the spirit as opposed to the investigators, because we know what it's like. From the investigator point of view, we know what it's like. You go to a building, you might hear a couple of sounds, but overall not much is going to happen. And everyone, at the moment, I could be wrong with this, but at the moment, everyone seems a bit, I don't know, there's a phrase, an expression, that I've completely forgotten. You know, it's basically hitting a piñata blindfolded. That's not the expression, but it's the equivalent of that. Stabbing in the dark, that's what it is. Everyone's doing that. And yeah, because I've seen criticisms of equipment. We're doing this Beardo article. I've seen criticisms of equipment. You know, being like, why are you using the same equipment if you've received nothing from it? And it's no one's got any new ideas particularly, but I think that's because the paranormal's hit a bit of a dead end. I think, and that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I think it's just people are barking up the wrong tree. I think that people need to think more from the perspective of the spirits. But even that, it's tricky because there are different theories as to what the spirit perceives. Because you've got intelligent hauntings, which is, like I say, me being a ghost type thing, of just they are as people but invisible. Then you've got residual hauntings, which are more based in history. So they're the repeating ones, which follow the lines of stone tape theory, etc. And it's a case of which is true, because I think only one of those will be true. I don't think both will happen. I could be wrong with that. There could be evidence towards both happening. Wave-particle duality, for instance. It was thought that waves existed, particles existed. However, it seems they're both kind of one in the same. It's weird. Ghosts could be like that. Where some are intelligent, some are not intelligent, but they're both the same thing, but not. It's like dementia patients, isn't it? Maybe residual hauntings are just demented spirits. That's a way of thinking of it, because dementia patients, like people with Alzheimer's, memory issues, whatever, they'll have a conversation, and then the memory will go, and then they'll have the exact same conversation again. Maybe that's what the spirits who are repeating events are like. Maybe they're kind of trapped in this cycle, like not literally trapped by forces or whatever, but it's a mental thing. But then you end up with all sorts of questions about the mental side of the paranormal, of what is the mind without the brain? Basically, it's that whole. You end up in a huge philosophical rabbit hole when you think about things from a spirit's point of view, which is fascinating. Do spirits have psychology? Is a big question. And that is something which I never hear anyone discuss, ever. No one ever discusses it. People always discuss the here and now, what we experience on our ends. But you're dealing with people, essentially. If spirits exist, you're dealing with people. And I know I've gone off in a huge tangent here, but it's a good bit to do before the next question. But yeah, it's a big thing of. I feel people need to approach investigating spirits in the same way that they would investigate another person. And I feel like that isn't done. I think people go from either a really historical angle or repeated angle or a mystical angle or religious angle, when really I think you need to be much more down to earth and just be like, oh, I'm just talking to a person that I can't see. I think. Could be wrong with that as well. I could be completely wrong with that, but yeah, people need to look more into the psychology, because it's like, think about the mentally ill. Think about people who are incredibly depressed, or well, probably that, but like the ones who are completely silent, non-interactive. How do you speak to them in a way that they will respond to you? I think that's the angle people need to approach, because for all we know, spirits may be incredibly depressed. They may be in that state, because, I mean, my own view on the paranormal is quite bleak, really, because imagine you died in the 1100s, right? That's like 900 years ago. Imagine dying, let's just round it up, let's say 1,000 years ago, you died. So 1,000 years ago, in that first year, probably not even the first year, probably the first month, maybe the first week, you'll try and communicate with people, and you'll try and do what you can, because you may not understand what's happened. You may be like, what's gone on? Because no one, I think, has an accurate idea of what death is. People think, heaven, or back then, like if you were a Viking or whatever, Valhalla, and this glorious place you go to with everything you've ever wanted. Or straight away, people may think that they're in hell or purgatory, because it basically, I think, is more along the lines of purgatory, this in between. And you'll be wandering the world as you are now, except you won't necessarily be able to talk to anyone. Now, the big question I have is, can you talk to other spirits? And the answer to that, I think, is maybe. But it's a case of, can you see those spirits? What does it sound like? And again, what is sound without ears? I think the psychics will have the best idea of this, because I think psychic communication, etc., is the more accurate view. But then imagine the torment if you were just in a building by yourself for a week, and then times that by 1,000 years. You're not going to be talking to anyone. You're going to be completely closed off, probably. So that's why I think if you investigate in a place, you need to approach it not as if you're talking to a friend or a family member, someone who's living, who you've known within the last year, or who you would meet on the street. I think you need to approach it as if you're talking to someone who is within an intense loneliness. And yeah, that's my own thoughts on that. Like I say, it's very bleak, but yeah, I think that's probably maybe accurate. It's something that's like, some people say, oh, that's worse than the idea of nothingness, being trapped on the earth, not being able to talk to anyone or do anything for many years. But that is kind of indicated in certain religions, right? Where I think it's Buddhism, where they believe that to achieve peace, you need to not have attachments, I could be wrong with that, by the way, saying Buddhism, but I believe there are religions where they say to achieve true inner peace, you need to recognize and accept that everything around you is temporary. You will not have everything around you in the afterlife. You need to be, in order to be truly happy, you need to not be attached to any of it. Friends, family, belongings, none of it. And there are probably religions which say that once you do that, then you enter heaven, and I believe that that's the truth, because I think in this after bit there is no heaven, there is no hell. I think if you're just on the world, if you don't have attachments, you're going to be far happier because you have nothing to be attached to, whereas otherwise you'll be missing all sorts of things that you were once attached to. So yeah, that's my own beliefs on that. Quite bleak, and probably off on a bit of a tangent, but yeah, that's a point I wanted to make. So Joe Vitale from Joe Vitale from Entity 7 Paranormal then asks, what got you all into the paranormal and debunking? So Kenny says he grew up Catholic, had belief from the beginning that there was an afterlife and miracles and spooky stuff could happen, and he grew up he grew up in search of he grew up with the programs such as In Search of and Unsolved Mysteries, and so monsters, ghosts, and UFOs were part of his upbringing. He was also a nerd regarding sci-fi and fiction, and so ghost hunting, and you can tell I can't read my notes very well. So then he got into ghost hunting when he grew up and had a lot of money and he could go out on his own. And then he joined clubs and found that not everything was as it seemed. He had his own personal experience with... See, that looks like it says shaved. It's like... Okay, yeah, he had his own personal experience because he was mistaken for a ghost. And ghost hunters, they thought he was a ghost, and they wouldn't accept any information he gave to them when he was like, no, it's not a ghost, it's just me. And so it set him to look into skeptical literature such as the Skeptical Inquiry magazine, and he gained more knowledge in editing, and the more he learned, the more he realised that mistakes were being made by people, and he decided to share his knowledge with others, and so he writes, makes videos, and tries to educate, which is all very good and noble, etc. And Joe then said he didn't want anything to do with the paranormal, with paranormal investigating. He thought that thought it was all seen on TV anyway, but he was dragged into it, and he was part of being a paranormal investigator is debunking. He's supposed to listen to claims, check it out, explain it. He's always debunked, and it's the fundamentals of being an investigator, which I agree with. I think that any paranormal investigator who disagrees with debunking is not a paranormal investigator. I think, I mean, I see it all the time. I see it in the groups I'm in on Facebook, where people will share images or footage or whatever, and they'll be confused when moderators don't accept the things, or you'll have people saying, look, I see this or that or whatever, and anyone says anything other then it's a ghost, they get absolutely slated, because anyone who believes it are just like, what? Why? You know, just getting distracted because I can hear people outside. But yeah, so people, like I say, people will try and be skeptical and try and debunk, but then anyone who believes in the paranormal will absolutely slate them because they're like, no, it is absolutely a ghost and nothing else. And the same happens the other way around as well. If someone shares an interesting capture, the skeptical people might absolutely tear it apart with absolutely no consideration for the other person's beliefs. And I think that there needs to be a little bit of a middle ground where debunkers and skeptical people are a bit more gentle, but then believers are a bit more open to thinking, yes, that actually makes a lot of sense regarding an explanation. A good example being bugs across camera. I've seen it before where people have shared footage of what looks like a white blob just walking along the street. And bearing in mind this is a camera angle from quite high up on like someone's porch or patio or something, you know, outside their front door, looking towards the road, and someone will share it being like, oh my god, look, it's a ghost walking down the street. And straight away you'll have people in the comments then saying, oh, great catch, that's really cool, you know, things like that. But if you actually pay attention to it and look at that white blob, you can see little bits of white moving along as it moves, and then suddenly the illusion is kind of broken because you're like, hang on a minute, they're legs, that's a bug, it's like a little spider going across the top. But then you can mention that to people and they will criticize, and they'll be like, no, that can't be, it's a ghost, and they'll have that firm belief. And I think that the believers, it's fine to believe, I think that they just need to be a little more open to these explanations. Not by a lot, just by a little bit. They just need to be like, oh yeah, that makes sense what you've said, it could very well be a bug. They don't have to accept it, they just need to accept that that could be an explanation, as long as the explanation makes sense. So Kenny says it's the result of an investigation. This is debunking. If you set out to debunk, you set out with a bias. You are looking to take out the claim. To investigate, you approach looking for the truth. If the claim is a ghost and you find evidence it isn't, then you have taken the bunk out of it, hence why debunked. They end up debunking and it's a fundamental part, but they don't intend on debunking if it's they don't intend on debunking as it's just a result of an investigation. With not enough information, you have to go with I don't know, and you can't make up a conclusion. You can't say that it is or isn't a ghost when you say I don't know. Yeah, I agree with him there. I think that people need to say I don't know a lot more than they do as well, instead of trying to make up claims and making up explanations. I mean, I've done it a few times where I've looked at footage, because when I see this footage that's shared, I look at it being like, oh, that's interesting. If I can't debunk it, or can't think of a good explanation that fits, I don't comment. If I can think of an explanation, I then comment. Say, and I'm very fair with the comment as well. I'll say, I think it's this, I'm not 100%, but it could be this. It's like there was one where someone on TikTok was sharing, I mean, I saw this on Facebook, but I think they'd initially posted it to TikTok, but it was stuff like that, a chair that was at a table being moved and blinds opening and closing and whatnot. So I looked at it and I used what Beardo says in his videos, and I used that to look at those bits of footage, and I could see like little wibbly lines where there could be someone standing and just that they've been masked out of. So I then comment saying, this is something I've noticed, it could be this, I'm not certain that it is, but that's an explanation just in case. Might be real, might not, I'm not sure, but this is it. And I think that's what people kind of need to do. They need to not necessarily say this is 100% debunked. They need to be like, this is an explanation, it could be applied here. I don't know for sure, as I'm not the one who has the original footage, etc. I've not caught it, I wasn't there. But this could be an explanation. And I think that as well, on the other side, the believers, they need to look at that and they need to not react in a harsh way and be like, oh, how dare you debunk my stuff. They need to look at it and be like, you know what you've said makes sense. I don't agree with it, but it makes sense. It could be an explanation. I personally think it's a ghost. You need to have those kinds of civil conversations, I think. So Joe then says, in terms of residentials, they're supposed to put people at ease, and that there are legitimate explanations as to why things are happening, and it puts people at ease. And I agree. I think that if you ever do a residential, I personally do not agree with residential investigations. I believe it was discussed in the previous part that residential investigations are very ethically dodgy. They're not great. Which on one hand you want to do residentials because you want to help people. On the other hand, you need to acknowledge we don't know anything at all about the paranormal. You can be extremely experienced, you can be confident with your own theories, you could be confident with your equipment, things like that. But at the end of the day, we don't know. We honestly don't. So you could do a residential investigation and you could say to them, there's nothing here. But then the person's still going to experience stuff potentially. So you need to go there and you need to be like, oh, that knocking is because of these pipes. And you need to try and, in a way, prove that to put their minds at ease, which you can't really do unless you're there at the time of the knocking, and then you can be like, if the knocking happens, it's going to come from this spot where the pipes are. And then you're with them, and you're like, let's listen for the knocking. Boof, there we go, it's the pipes. That's the only way to properly put someone's mind at ease. Because otherwise, you could give some explanations, they might not be happy with that, and they're still going to experience stuff. And once you are in the mindset of there could be a ghost, suddenly there is. And that is something I feel like people don't really talk about much either. And I don't mean that there is as in there literally is. I mean mentally there is. A brilliant example, again, in terms of this. When I was investigating here, so I've not investigated this location, like where I currently am, for a while now. But I just need to move that a little bit. I'm going to move this because I've just seen that you can kind of see the corner of... There we go. We'll have that there. Just because it looks a little bit better, I'll move over a little bit. There we go. That's a bit better. But yeah, so this house is where I live. I've investigated it a number of times. When I was investigating the cellar, because I do believe that there's something a bit dodgy about the cellar, suddenly I noticed that the cellar door kept on being open when I thought to myself, hang on a minute, I've closed that. That's what I mean. The moment you start thinking there's a ghost here, you'll notice things, and that very well could have just been my memory being dodgy, because it is. But it's why I've got notes and whatnot, so because I wouldn't be able to remember half of this, at least not accurately. But yeah, but then I noticed that and start thinking, hang on, is that a ghost or is that me? I don't know. And then the psychological tumbleweed starts, basically. Or snowball, rather. And that's what will happen with residentials. You'll go somewhere, and even if you say to them, look, it's not a ghost, it's these things, the person's already slightly... They're considering it's a ghost, which means they're going to keep noticing things. And if they notice things beyond your explanations, it's going to get far worse. Because they're like, hang on, that doesn't fit, oh my god, no one can help me. That's what it's going to end up being. And if you go there and you say, oh yeah, it is a ghost, it is this, that's going to, again, it's not good because you told them there's a ghost there. And a lot of teams on YouTube, at least, are quick to say demon. I personally don't believe angels or demons. I believe positive spirits and negative spirits. They're just normal human spirits. Just some work on positivity, some work on negativity. It's the exact same with living people. Some people thrive on the positive, others on the negative. And I think over the years we've kind of taken that idea and emphasized it and heightened it to be godlike beings, which is not right. Or at least I don't believe it is. So yeah, so residential's ethically not good because you're just going to end up frightening people. I've just realised I've been going backwards with my notes. Yeah, I've been going backwards with my notes. So yeah, that's embarrassing. So yeah, with my notes, I put a number at the top corner of each page. I know you couldn't see that because of the light. But yeah, I've been going backwards. So now I'm going to actually go to when it started, which is, Beardo asks, has any of you ever run? Everyone says no. Kenny says that he walks quickly towards it. And Beardo says that he's ran at things. Justin from the Paranormal Monkey podcast says that he walks slowly towards it because he's worried that something might happen to him. And they used to do lots of live streams. I preferred lots... That was a weird noise. I preferred lots of lives instead of edited episodes. I used to have a locked off camera, go out for a few hours, lock up the property, let people listen in live for a few hours to whatever was happening. And you got knocks, taps, stuff playing with the microphone, voices, female voices, Latin voices. And it was interesting for them as they knew it was around the microphone because of fakery. Anything maybe, yeah. So because of fakery, anything that might be genuine doesn't then make a ripple in terms of viewers and subscribers. There are so many bigger and weirder things being faked, things, smaller channels, and so he thinks that smaller channels have to work harder to prove it's a real experience. I agree there. I think that that is the case. I think that, and in terms of what Justin says about walking slowly, yeah, if you do a abandoned location, there could very well be people in that location which you don't know about, and they could be a danger to you. They could have weapons. I have seen live streams where people have been in abandoned locations and then they have been confronted by other people who have been holding bats, etc. None of them were harmed, but it's not ideal. And you kind of dread to think what would have happened had they not been filming at the time. So, yeah, you have to investigate any noises, but you need to be careful at the same time. It's why you shouldn't investigate abandoned locations by yourself. You should go with other people all the time. Safety in numbers, you know. And yeah, and in terms of lock-up camera, I've done that. I've left camera running in the cell before where I've then listened back to the footage and you can hear little metallic taps, as it were, like clinking sounds. Oh, again, sorry for the coughing. And yeah, I've not had voices, but strange noises do occur. So then Paul from Ghosts on Trent says, if you're not interested in what debunkers have to say, then you're not interested in the paranormal as far as I'm concerned. Which is a very good point. I think that's in response to a comment that came through. I believe they'd said something along the lines of, because I've not made a note of it, they said something like, I'm not interested in what you debunkers have to say, answer viewers' questions. And that was, I believe, Paul's response to that comment. And yeah, it's one of those weird things where that was a weird comment that came through, because with that comment of not interested in what you have to say, answer viewers' questions, that's a contradiction. You're not interested in what they have to say, but they're interested in hearing the answers to the questions. I'm just like, a bit weird. But Jordan says, belief in psychology plays the biggest role in the paranormal. People believe they've captured something. They want to believe for various reasons, and they put photos out there, such as orbs, and give them explanation. And so you can give them an explanation as to what they've captured, and they react like you've kicked their dog due to how mad that they get. People want to experience something and be a part of something, so they take it at face value regardless of the alternative explanations provided as to what they've captured. I agree, and this is kind of what I was rambling a bit about earlier on. My spoken thoughts are not quite as organised as my written ones, as you will know by now if you've watched the live and if you've read the articles. The articles are, I'd like to think, quite eloquently written, but my speech, the brain to mouth, it does not work. But yeah, so I agree with what he said. There's a lot of psychological stuff at play. I think that when it comes to people defending the paranormal, I think that's because of fear, possibly also upbringing. Because at the end of the day, the paranormal, it's about death. Everyone experiences it. Everyone will know the answers eventually. And yeah, so when you discuss the paranormal, some people want to believe because they don't want to believe that there's just nothing afterwards. It's when you've done something for so long, it's incredibly difficult to imagine doing anything different. We are so aware of ourselves and of the world around us that the idea of nothingness afterwards is incomprehensible. We are so active and whatnot. I mean, it's like even with dreams, it requires the brain to function. So it's not even like you can say, oh yeah, you'll just go to sleep and dream and live another life as such, because that isn't what will happen. Unless the brain isn't required for that, but I'm pretty sure it is. So it's a bizarre thought, but it's something that we'll all experience eventually, which is a sad thought, but also intriguing. Which is, I think, skeptics come from the angle of intrigue, whereas believers come from the angle of need. I think it's need versus intrigue. And you could argue those who go off need are way more biased. Because you need to be wary of that. Everyone involved in the paranormal likely has some form of bias. I try not to be biased, but everyone will have some form of bias. And yeah, so Kev then says, back when he used to do it, social media wasn't huge. If you were skeptical, you definitely didn't have a following, maybe 40 people. And belief's personal. People feel bullied or like you're going against them as you're telling them that their loved one is gone or it's an emotional attachment. As a skeptic or a debunker, you have to understand you're offending due to their own belief system. It comes from a deep need of the afterlife being real or mystical stuff developed through trauma response, prodding at their protection. And yeah, he goes a little bit more in depth there, Kev does, because he talks about more of the psychological side to it, which, yeah, absolutely, there's a psychological side to it. Because if you think about the paranormal, like I say, we're all going to experience it eventually, but while we're alive, it's psychological because you know people who've died. You've had friends, family members, etc., who have died. You may not want to let them go. You may need to hold on to them, and you may need to believe they're watching over you or they're with you. You can still talk to them, etc. It's a tough one, but it's deep-rooted psychological, that need for human connection, but wrapped in emotional attachment of friends and family, which is why people react like you've kicked their dog, because if you say that orb you've captured isn't real, they don't hear it as that orb I've captured isn't real. They hear it as my family member is gone. Even if the orb isn't related to that, it's just evidence of the paranormal in general, they take it as you saying the paranormal isn't real as a whole, as opposed to this photo, footage, whatever, isn't real. And I think people need to understand when debunkers, because like in a previous part, Beardo said he doesn't debunk the paranormal, he debunks fake paranormal teams. People need to understand that when it comes to debunkers, they aren't debunking the paranormal as a whole. Certain ones are trying to, but I don't think you can debunk it as a whole. I think you need to go instance by instance. Just as I don't think you can prove it as a whole, you probably need to go instance by instance. Although you could argue if you prove one instance, then that means that you've proved that it exists, I suppose. But again, that's an interesting thing to think about as to where the proof or disproof going to come from. But because I think James Randi, you could argue he tried to disprove the whole thing. But again, you have to do bit by bit, being like, what you're showing me is actually because of this, and you need to apply that to a bunch of things. And I think someone needs to do that. I think that someone, to disprove the paranormal, I think you need to create a list of stuff. I've seen it before. I have a picture, I hope still saved on this device, which I need to share if I do, which it's different images that have been taken, and beneath it, it says, like for each image, it says why that image looks that way. I need to share that if I have that. But someone needs to do that, but for the paranormal. For instance, with mental illness, there's a book which says everything regarding mental illness, where you can look through it and be like, you're mentally ill, you are this thing on this page. This is why you are experiencing what you're experiencing. That needs to be done for the paranormal, where if the paranormal does not exist, you need to create this book or something like that, or a list, where you can literally look at any scenario. You can hear a vague bit of detail about this scenario, and you can use that to go, I think it's this, and you investigate it more and you go, yes it is, it fits. If you have that, because that's repeatability, and that's how you disprove it. And then if suddenly you come across something that that book doesn't explain, suddenly that becomes interesting, because then you need to look more into that one instance, because that one instance is potentially the one which is ghosts, because that's the only thing that's not going to be in the book. So that's what I think needs to be done. It's been done in other areas, so it should be done in the paranormal, probably. Maybe. I don't know, but... yeah, so... Beardo then says he and Kenny are on opposite ends of the spectrum. But if someone went up to them and said that they smell cigarette smoke and they think that their mum's visiting, they both say that it makes them feel better to believe. They both say if it makes them feel better to believe that the mum's visiting, then don't let anyone tell them that they're wrong. And again, he doesn't debunk the paranormal, he debunks the fake paranormal channels. If someone sends footage in an email, he responds with, do you really want to know? Do you really want to know the truth? One guy said that his kids were terrified of the garage as he'd captured an apparition. And so he'd sent the footage to Beardo, and Beardo saw that it was just a cobweb going across the cheap camera. And he'd asked the guy if it was a personal belief that he'd had in the paranormal with this footage. But the guy said no, he wants to know the answer and what it is because the kids are terrified of going into that room now. So Beardo then explained it was just a cobweb that was being pulled across by a vacuum due to the door being open and closed and whatnot. And so the guy checked the footage and did say every time the door was moved, the ghost walked past. And so Beardo doesn't feel bad debunking that kind of thing. But when it comes to paranormal stuff, he is when it comes to personal stuff, he is careful with what he says. And Kenny said with his personal stories, he asks if it makes them feel comfort and good, and if yes, then doesn't say much more as long as they don't go out, start a church based around it and get money, etc. He has no problem with it as long as it brings comfort. He has no say in it if that is the case, but if they go on TV saying that it's all true, then he might comment on it as it's out in public, but will still be polite and professional. Now, I've just remembered, in the article I wrote about this, I had a really good discussion point, because this is quite the debate about the truth versus lies, basically, in short. Is it okay to lie to someone if it makes them feel better? I'm going to have a quick drink here. Dramatic pause, you know. Just glance at the time as well. Just bearing in mind how long I've been live for. So is it okay to lie to someone if it makes them feel better? Especially in context with the paranormal. Because Beardo and Kenny both say, if someone goes up to them with something personal and they say, I think it's my mum or my dad or my friend or whatever, they'll be like, if you believe that and it brings you comfort, you keep believing that. And they won't debunk further. Is that okay? Because I always think, the thing that keeps me interested in the paranormal, I'm trying to move these papers out of the way because they're kind of in my way. I want to sit a bit comfier. There we go. So, the thing that keeps me interested in the paranormal, because I've been interested for many years at this point, the thing that kind of keeps me particularly interested is the idea that the paranormal has been in discussion and it has been believed for thousands of years. Ancient civilizations, I believe, thought about some sort of paranormal entity, deity, realm, whatever. The origins of Halloween, for instance, originated in this pagan belief, so many years ago. Part of that was communicating with the dead. Cavemen probably believed in some sort of an afterlife. So, the thing that keeps me going with it is we've maintained this belief for thousands of years, throughout probably all of human history, and today, regardless of all of our technology and smarts and knowledge and science and whatnot, we still are not sure if an afterlife exists. That to me is bizarre. And I think it's one of those things, such as beliefs about the earth being flat, such as belief that the planets and sun revolved around the Earth, various other things that I can't think of right now, you know? Various things like that have been utterly disproven. Yet we haven't settled on the paranormal. I feel like the paranormal is still extremely divisive. And I feel like many people still believe in the paranormal, many people disbelieve in the paranormal. I think that it's a 50-50 argument. I don't think we're at that point where we're leaning one way or the other. I honestly think it's split. And that baffles me. It's like, I just think, how has this been going for so long? And so thinking about that, you know, obviously you've got churches, etc., which are linked, and churches are likely always going to be around. Because they're slightly different, because how do you prove or disprove a god, you know? You can't. It is purely belief. But in terms of the paranormal, that's far more provable or disprovable, because we're actively experiencing these things. We've narrowed down locations where they're said to happen, yet we haven't proven or disproven, regardless of our technology and knowledge and whatnot. I think one day we will, but it baffles me how it seems very on the fence. And I think part of that reason is because of the ethics behind it. So Beardo and Kenny, both skeptical. Beardo believes in the paranormal, though Kenny absolutely doesn't. But with both of them saying, if they've said it's a personal thing, we don't tell them what it is. We just say, you believe that if you want. The short-term answer is that's the right thing to do. The immediate response answer is that is right. That is ethically correct. You have kept that person's beliefs and their emotional state intact. But in the long term, the grand scheme of the paranormal, that person will continue to believe in the paranormal. That person may have kids. They then may tell their kids about the paranormal. Their kids then may grow up believing in the paranormal. And they may then talk to it about their friends, and their friends may then believe in the paranormal. It's a snowball effect, where if you let one person believe in something that's not true, it'll get passed on and on and on and on, until it's this huge group of people that believe it. It's how churches come to be. And even though it isn't quite the same as a church, it's still a belief being spread amongst numerous people. And as a result, I would argue long term, what Beardo and Kenny do in that moment is not correct. I think there is a middle ground. I think that if it's something personal to someone, I think they need to say to them, you know, be gentle about it kind of thing. I think they need to say to them, look, I'm more than happy to tell you what this is. But you need to remember, just because this one bit has an explanation, it doesn't mean that your belief as to a relative being present is wrong. It does not mean that, you know, we've debunked whatever you think this is as such. It just means this one bit of what you've called evidence isn't evidence. It just means this one bit is actually this other thing. You've just misinterpreted it. But you might go and capture something else, which could very well be legitimate. It's kind of unicorn theory, in a way, with ghosts, where it's like, just because you haven't seen a unicorn doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That's kind of the approach you need to take with it. Where you need to say to them, look, just because we've disproved this, it doesn't mean your relative doesn't still exist, kind of thing, you know? And then they need to say, if you, like, we'll leave a bit of a gap, we'll put the explanation. If you want to read the explanation, go for it. If you don't, then don't. That's what I think they need to do. That way they are clear in terms of stomping on that little bit of evidence, because it kind of, the paranormal is like a fire in the snowball effect way. It just stomps out the flames, or stomps out the spark rather, before it can evolve into flames. There may still be smoke present, but you've put out most of it, kind of. And that's what I think they need to do. And I use in the article the allegory of the cave to explain this. So if you are unaware, I will probably do a whole article on the allegory of the cave, because I do think it's relevant when it comes to the paranormal, particularly this topic. The allegory, it was a hypothetical situation created by Plato, and it says that you could imagine a cave, and there are some people chained in this cave to face this cave wall, and behind them there's a fire, and there are puppeteers making shadows on the wall. These people who are facing the cave wall, these shadows are all they see of the world. That's their interpretation. What they see of these shadows is how they believe the world is. But then you can release one of these prisoners, and they could go out to the outside world. Now, some of them, like, you could release a bunch of them if you wanted. Not all of them are actually going to leave the cave. They're going to get to the mouth of the cave, and they're going to be blinded by the sun. Those who are blinded are likely to go back to where they came from, back to that wall, to the comfort they know, to the life that they know, because they've just experienced pain in their eyes and this blinding brightness. So they've gone back to what they know, what they're comfortable with. But then you can have one person who endures, and eventually their eyes adjust, the pain fades, and they see the world for what it really is. And they could be amazed by that. And then they'll go back into the cave, and they'll be ecstatic or whatever, but their eyes will, again, they'll have to adjust for a period of time. So they'll kind of stumble around in the dark, not knowing where they're going. And everyone else in the cave will kind of see that or hear that and be like, oh no, what's happened to him? Oh no. And already you've got the others which were injured and turned back, saying, oh, don't go there, you'll get injured. And this person, again, their eyes will eventually adjust or whatnot, but they could free every prisoner in the cave. A lot of those prisoners are not going to go, because they're going to hear the tales of blindness, they're going to see the blindness. They're not going to want to go. Some might, but some who do go, again, they'll be like, who are trusting, they'll be like, oh no, I was wrong to trust you because now I'm blind. I've had searing pain in my eyes now. And then they'll turn back. So, and this is why it can take a while for a belief or an idea or something like that to actually come into fruition, and why you can quite often have the masses remain in this belief that is wrong, because they are put off or frightened by what could be correct. And this is the case with this. You've got those who stay in the cave versus those who leave the cave. Is it better to stay in the cave in comfort and what you know, or is it better to leave the cave, experience pain for a few moments, but overall be open to so much more? And that's where the paranormal comes into play. Is it better to let people believe that their relatives are gone, at which point they'll have... so I've messed that up. Is it better to let people believe that their relatives are still around, which is the equivalent of them staying in the cave, staying in their little comfort bubble, what they know, what they believe? Is it better to let them believe that lie, or is it better to release them from the cave and kind of drag them out and let them endure that emotional pain, but for them to then be able to have this understanding of how the paranormal may actually be, or how the world actually works? And I think it's better, even though it causes them emotional pain to begin with, they'll heal, they'll get better. I think it's better to bring them out, or give them the option at the very least to bring them out. Whereas if Beardo and Kenny are just saying, we're not going to debunk it, you believe what you want to believe, I think that's a line that they should debunk, or give the option to explain what the footage is that's been shared to them. Because already, if someone shared footage, they've kind of expressed a willingness to hear an answer. So I think that's the debate there. I think that even though ethically it can seem right to keep someone in the dark, as it were, and to let them believe that their relatives are still around, etc., I think if they've shared footage which can be debunked, I think it's better in the long run for the paranormal if you debunk the footage or give option for them to read a debunk of the footage. Because that way, like I say, the snowball doesn't occur. It kind of cuts it off there if possible. So that's my own take on that. I get why they don't want to get involved in the personal stuff, but I think you kind of have to, as cruel as that may seem to some people. I do think that you'd need to do that. But yeah, and then Kenny asked Beardo, what do you mean that we're on opposite sides of the spectrum? What does that mean? Can you clarify that? So Beardo then says, it's probably not the right term. What he means is he's a believer because of paranormal experiences, but things will happen and his brain kicks into what would Kenny say or what would Mr. Gray say, which is a more sceptical side of things. And he sent footage to Mr. Gray asking for his thoughts, because he's more sceptical and he values Mr. Gray's opinion. And Beardo tries finding a middle ground, but Mr. Gray and Kenny are more sceptical. Kenny then says it's not the opposite, as Beardo is still looking for an answer, and he isn't posting stuff on social media claiming it's a ghost, and he thinks that the only difference is that Kenny doesn't believe in an afterlife, whereas Beardo does. Which, I agree there. I do think, because Beardo does often say him and Kenny are opposites, and it's like, no, he's more sceptical, but you're not opposites, because you're both sceptical. The only way you're opposites is one believes and one does not. But all in all, their aim is the same. They're on the same team. They're just approaching it from slightly different belief systems. And I believe that is all of the notes, which has lasted just over an hour, which isn't that bad. But yeah, apologies for reading it out of order. I did not realise I started on the last page and went a bit backwards. So at the start of the video where I said, this starts with this comment. It doesn't. That was the last page. But yeah, so I hope that you've enjoyed this live stream and found it interesting. Like I say, it discussed the allegory of the cave. So I was looking forward to this live because it does have interesting discussion points, especially regarding the allegory. And yeah, and thank you for everyone for watching. I will go and be live on TikTok now for a little bit of time. Yeah, that's basically all that I've got to say, because I think I've discussed everything that I needed to discuss for this article. So thank you very much, and I hope that you all have a great evening. Oh, also, before I press the finish button, just because I wanted to put on the end of the live, next week. So I try and live stream every Wednesday. Usually the schedule is Monday I'll upload an article, Wednesday I'll do an article snippet in a live stream, and then Friday I'll do another article. Next week I'm on holiday, it may all be derailed. The Wednesday 1000% will be derailed regarding live streams. I don't know if it will be regarding the snippets, it shouldn't be, but it might be. Also, the Monday article might be derailed, it depends, because like I said at the start of this video, I'm doing stock take tomorrow, so I mean, if I went to sleep now, I'd be getting 8 hours of sleep, and I need to still stream, etc. I haven't yet done all the notes for Monday's article, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So Monday, if Monday is delayed, Friday will be delayed. So there may be no articles next week, and there won't be a live stream next week. But I may do a live stream on the Thursday instead of the Wednesday. The articles, like I say, may be delayed, but Thursday I will probably do a live stream in the evening to make up for no live stream on the Wednesday. That's my intention. We'll see regarding articles when they happen. But I will keep you updated on Facebook and other social media, etc. I'll probably do a short video discussing it on TikTok as well if you're on there. But yeah, and then after next week, everything will go back to normal with schedules. So at the end of Friday's article, this Friday's article, that's all fine, good, on time. I'll put a note at the end just saying, here's what the schedule should be. It might not be that though. And there won't be a live on the Wednesday, but it may be the Thursday. Because I will have an article to discuss. So thank you very much again to everyone for watching. Sorry to go a bit rambly and probably a bit off topic in places and whatnot, but it's been great. It's been good to discuss all this, and thank you very much. And I will see you next Thursday, hopefully. We'll see.